And there she is. Okay, Carmen, you definitely look ready. I'm going to mute the microphone on my side. Please feel free to begin whenever you want.
Thanks, Derek. Good morning, everyone. My presentation today, I'm using my favorite palindrome: a man, a plan, a canal, Panama. Recently, I've been in communication with Yola, who asked me specifically about my first presentation what I meant by having a plan. And going back through the presentation and her questions to me, it was a portion of the talk where I discussed moving to Seattle in 2008 without having a plan, and that I wouldn't recommend that for others. So what happened then is that I had a different career. I was working at a nonprofit in Los Angeles, and I was ready for a change. I'd also been away from Frank for several years at that point, and it was easier for me to move to Seattle than for him to move back to Los Angeles. So I got my things in order and of sorts and moved to Seattle without really having any job prospects. I figured I just wanted to get back into engineering, and I would figure it out when I arrived. Unfortunately, I happened to land at one of the worst periods of our economic recent history, and it made for a very interesting job search. I essentially spent 3 months, actually more like 4 or 5 months, applying for many, many jobs and not really finding anything, and eventually just saying I have to pay rent, so I took on a temping position. I was a administrative assistant, or rather a receptionist, at a steel distributor in SoDo, South Seattle. And that was very interesting. My company was wonderful. They were very nice. It didn't pay a whole lot, but it had health insurance benefits after I completed my tenure with the temp agency. And right around the time where I was getting ready to sign on and just accept that I would have, this very, frankly, boring job, although stable, somewhat boring, I decided that I would just do that, get the health insurance, and then go back to school and get a master's degree and figure out how to continue my engineering career from there. As it turns out, about a week before I was going to sign the paperwork to be a full-time employee, my current employer called and said, "Hey, are you still looking for a job?" So I said yes, and it was an interesting experience because I had known that I wanted to be an engineer. I went to school for environmental engineering, which was more focused on water resources and water quality. And this job that I'm currently working on is now, I do HVAC design and plumbing design for very efficient buildings. So not exactly what I studied for in school, but just when I went into the interview, it was mainly myself interviewing the company to see if that was some place that I could fit into, as well as them seeing if I would fit the requirements of their needs at that time. So I'm not sure if it was destiny or luck that I landed in my company. I'm very happy with it. I have a great cohort of coworkers, and the projects that we work on are fantastic. But I've always known that I wanted to be an engineer. I think, well, maybe even before that, when I was 8 years old, I remember sitting in the car with my brother and my cousins in the back seat, and my mom and my aunt in the front. We were driving somewhere, and my aunt turned around and asked each of us, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And my cousin Tony said, "I want to be a lawyer." And my brother said, "I want to be a firefighter." My other cousin Stella said she wanted to be a doctor or something. And I remember just saying, "I want to be an artist." My mom looked back and said, "Oh, that's nice." And my aunt said, "You should maybe think about being an architect, because that's kind of like an artist, but they have a very steady income, so maybe you should do that." And as a young child, I remember thinking, "Oh yeah, I guess artists, starving artists, maybe that's not the right path for me. I guess I could be an architect." But then as I got into middle school, I was exposed to some engineering students from the local community college, and my path was set from there. So I knew that in order to become an engineer, I would have to go to college, and essentially that was my whole trajectory throughout my high school career, was being as involved in academics as I possibly could, doing everything I could to frankly escape my high school and my situation in Texas so that I could get out of there and pursue my life, as it were. So I think I've definitely been working hard at my current career goals and whether or not that was luck, I think it's a big part of it, and I hope to work through that with you here in this presentation. So in my career, I work with plans every day, literally those rolled up plans, digital plans, plans and specifications, timelines. And as you can see, this is not a great picture, but there is a lot of construction going on in Seattle. Many, many cranes throughout the skyline, both for office towers, multifamily buildings, building subway stations. There's just a lot of construction going on in Seattle. And as I know, every project that has a defined beginning, middle, and end needs a plan in order to accomplish it. And usually those come from the architects or the developers, and we fit into those plans and make sure that we throw our designs in there throughout the cycle. There's a lot of collaboration and back and forth, and to the point where there's a hole that is dug and a building goes up and it gets opened, and then we can walk away and go on to the next project. So the importance there is that a project is not a process. A project plan specifically has a beginning, middle, and an end, whereas a process is something you just do every day. For example, an assembly line. There is no beginning, middle, or end necessarily. It's just something that constantly happens. I like to think of the process as similar to your daily routine. You wake up, you put your clothes on, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you go to work, and you rinse, repeat, do that all, every day pretty much. Maybe on the weekends it's a little different for you. As opposed to saying, I have a book that I want to write, for example. Derek has many examples to give on that front. And you sit down and you write a draft, and then you revise it, and there's a lot of back and forth. But at the end, there is a book that you can physically hold, and that is a process, and that is the end point. And of course, even with a plan, things can go awry. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry, is this famous saying. So even though you can have a plan and have a very specific idea of how it's going to be accomplished, there are things that could be getting in the way. For example, one of the more prominent projects going on in Seattle currently is the digging of the tunnel underneath the viaduct, which borders our shoreline here. This big giant machine was conceived and manufactured. They call her Bertha, after the first female mayor of Seattle. And as you can see there, there's a tiny little man here that even, so tiny, a 6-foot person. I don't know that many people that are 6 feet, but that's still pretty large compared to, other machines that have been built. So this big machine started going through, and there was a lot of controversy as to whether or not Seattle needed a tunnel and was that the best solution for a traffic situation. And things happened, and it went ahead, and it got voted, and the money was set aside, and the machine was constructed in, I want to say in Japan, and brought out here, stuck in the ground, and started going. And about 3 months ago in mid-December, Bertha stopped moving. She got stuck. As it turns out, there was an 8-inch diameter steel pipe that was placed there by our own Washington Department of Transportation about 10 years ago for a study on the percolation in the soil and filtration in that area. And they just abandoned it. They forgot about it. It was there in plans, and people knew, or they should have known about it. So when Bertha got stuck, there was about a 6-week process of trying to figure out what the heck is going on here. And as it turns out, she ran into this big iron rod that somebody had forgotten. So watching out for obstacles. Even with the best laid plans and all this fine machining, big piece of pipe can get stuck in your wheelhouse there. So the way I see the Tao cultivation and why we come together every week is to learn tools to help us with our processes that will enable us to achieve our goals that we have our plans set for. So I know that Derek has some information in some of his books regarding that virtuous cycle of, if you follow the Tao, you find yourself being on this path and getting projected forward. The most important thing for me is, even with a plan, to be flexible and to be spontaneous. And I believe that through Tao cultivation, we can learn the tools to, even when we encounter obstacles, to know how to step aside and around them to continue on our path. And hopefully for all of us, it is a path of contentment and happiness, as Bill was mentioning earlier. Figuring out even those obstacles that we present within ourselves, the self-sabotage, the negative feelings, the working through antagonism with colleagues, or saying this is not the life I want to live, and still wallowing in it and not making any changes personally to allow you to see the future and to see your way out of a situation which you may not be happy with. So that's how I see Tao cultivation, is to give you the tools to allow you to meet your life plans. Ultimately, I think that's why we're here, not just to say I want a better career tomorrow, I want to find love, but all these different ways to align yourself with the universe and with reality and help you achieve your goals within your given circumstances. So my talk today, as I mentioned, was called A Man, a Plan, a Canal, Panama. I love that palindrome. And as I was researching this project, I realized, I didn't really know a whole lot about the Panama Canal, other than it is one of the major transportation hubs and access points that allows our world to be more and more tied together every day physically. We have this internet connection that I'm happy to speak to many people all across the world today. But ultimately, you need goods and services that come from many countries. So I found this really great image. The Panama Canal is about 51 miles, or about 82 kilometers in length. It's a series of locks and lakes that allow large ships to be able to travel from one ocean to the other. And even though this is an interesting graphic, I think what might be more interesting for you is to see an interactive version of that trip. And with that, I'm going to turn on that video. So with that, I hope you'll join me in celebrating the 100th year anniversary of the Panama Canal. They are expanding. They're making it so that larger and larger ships can go through. And whatever your life plans may be, I hope that you find usefulness in our Tao discussions. As you know, the journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath one's feet. So whatever your wishes and desires for your life, I hope you can start making your plans for them, and you are very successful with the beginning of your journey in this coming week. So thank you, everyone, and with that, I'm going to return it back to Derek.